Hey guys, welcome to Chef Grace's Place. So today, I got kind of a little bit of bad news. So as you guys know, I started my channel when I lost both my jobs to COVID-19. I was a flight attendant and I also taught pastry classes at Sur La Table. And that was a job that I was hoping was going to come back, but I just heard the news today that my location is going to be closing. But on the bright side, I can still be here and teach all you guys, and that's a lot of fun. So in times like this, I think it's really important to celebrate the good moments. So because there's a lot of stuff we could go get upset about, but I think the best thing is to focus on the positive. Positive thing that's happening is Noel. He's turning 30 this month, which is really exciting. And of course we had bigger plans, but I think one of the nicest things you could do for someone is to cook for them. And I'm sure a lot of plans are getting canceled or moved to a different date, but it doesn't mean we can't have a good time. So I think one of the things that everyone should learn how to make is some sort of cake. So this is a really simple chocolate cake recipe. It's actually my favorite chocolate cake recipe. I tweaked the recipe a little bit, but I first found this recipe in Chocolatier magazine when I was like a teenager. And I've used this base. I've changed it a little bit over the years. It's like the most moist, chocolatey, fudgy chocolate cake ever. I call it, in my recipe book, I wrote it as the best chocolate cake ever. And I still think it's the best chocolate cake ever. So one of the best things about this chocolate cake recipe is you don't need a mixer. I'm sure with this whole pandemic thing, like, if you don't already have a mixer, you're probably not going to go spend a couple $100s to buy one. I have my ingredients separated out into two categories. We have our wet ingredients, which are the wet ones, and the dry ones. And we're just going to combine them in this bowl to make our cake batter. Okay, so my recipe calls for a cup of hot water. So I have everything in my wet but the hot water because I didn't want it to get cold. And I'm gonna add that now. In my recipe, you'll also notice I have instant coffee in there, and that's to help bring out the chocolatey notes in the chocolate. If you can't find instant coffee anywhere, you could replace the cup of hot water with a cup of hot coffee, and that will also work. And it doesn't have to be boiling hot. I'm just gonna let the water get hot and use that. So whenever you add something hot to eggs, you want to make sure you stir it because it will curdle if it's not moving. So make sure you're stirring, and if your bowl starts spinning around, just put a towel under it. Next, I have my dry ingredients, and you're gonna want, oh, I forgot my nutmeg. You don't really want to sift this. Like, you don't have to sift it, it's just extra work. I just run a fork through it to mix it together. You could even do the whisk before you get it all wet. So once you have your wet ingredients mixed up and your dry ingredients mixed up, it's time to combine them into the cake batter. Whenever you do a cake batter, you want to do it in this order: wet, dry, wet, dry, wet. This kind of helps make sure there's no lumps. That means you have the wet ingredients in thirds and the dry ingredients in half. So I'm gonna put about a third of my wet ingredients in the bowl and half my dry. And then I'm gonna mix it up. So you wanna make sure this is like 80% whisked together before you add your next portion of the wet ingredients. Now I'm gonna add more wet. You can really see the, it's starting to become more of a batter, but the suspension's pretty even. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and add the rest of my dry. So I'm really focusing on breaking up any lumps I might see. And then I'm gonna add in, this is pretty good. I'm gonna add in my, I have a couple lumps of cocoa powder in there. I'm gonna add in my the rest of the wet ingredients, pretty slow. Right. And this is just gonna help me get it evenly distributed. Now, if your arm gets tired, here's some advice. Right now I'm whisking and I'm using my bicep muscle right here. But if I start to get tired, I'm gonna switch my grip. And this is gonna help. This is gonna activate my tricep muscle and kind of give my bicep a break. You could also switch hands too, but we're not gonna be mixing that too much longer. So I got all my clumps out, it's looking smooth. I'm gonna go ahead and add the rest of my wet ingredients. And make sure you're scraping the bottom. So I'm just gonna whisk it and add a little bit of air into it. Be good, and make sure everything is blended in well. Now we just got to put it in the pan. To prep your pan, and take some parchment paper. I want to stress that parchment paper is not wax paper. Okay? Wax paper is paper with wax on it. And if you put that in the oven, it'll melt. Because it's wax. But parchment paper is a silicone treated paper basically that is non-stick, and it's pretty bad for the environment actually, but it you know, it doesn't stick to food, so there you go. You can buy big sheets like this, which is a full sheet pan, at restaurant supply stores, which is usually what I do, and then I just cut them in half to make them half sheets for my home oven. So this way I get twice as much parchment paper. You can also buy it in a roll in the grocery store, but I think you just get more for your money in the sheets, and they lay flat, which is nice. So I'm gonna cut out a circle, mark it with my Sharpie. I'm also going to cut out a strip like this, probably 4 inches, and that's going to call the collar. It's going to go around the edges of the pan, and what that's going to do is if the batter rises above the pan, it'll prevent it from spilling all over the place and make it continue up. It's basically a frame or a continuation of the pan. So to attach the parchment paper to the pan, you just need something to grease it with. You could use oil. I'm gonna use some butter though. Don't worry about flouring the pan or anything. All right, so I just buttered it. And then I'm gonna push it down. I'm gonna add my collar. So collars don't have to be in one piece. All right, this is actually pretty tall. As you can see, I'm missing a part here. So what I'm gonna do is just cut another strip and put it there. I'm actually gonna cut this down because this is kind of ridiculously tall. That's better. Doesn't need to be that tall. Right. I'm just gonna cut a little piece for that side. Perfect. So once you have it all the way around, the force of the batter is going to push out the sides and make the parchment stay up, so don't worry about it. So this is where I'm going to switch over to a spatula or a bowl scraper instead of the whisk. Now always make sure you scrape your bowl down. You don't want to waste any batter because we worked so hard putting it together. It should all go into the cake. Unless you like to eat cake batter, but it shouldn't go in the garbage. So once you're satisfied with your bowl scraping, it's time to get it in the oven. So my oven's preheated, and I'm just gonna put this on a sheet pan. So this way it's really easy to take in the oven and turn. I'll probably check on it in a half an hour and see how it's cooking. I haven't baked too many cakes in this oven yet, but I know there's hot and cold spots, and it's an electric oven, so all the heat tends to sit on the bottom by the coils. So I'm gonna check on it in a half hour. I'll probably turn it, and we'll go from there. Okay, so my cake's been in there about 20 minutes. You can really see it rose a lot. It was a fresh batch of baking soda, so that's definitely going to help. You can also see how that collar is really helping it. I don't want to open my oven door because that's going to let all the heat out. That's why we're going through the window here. But you can also see how wet it looks. And it doesn't seem like it's pulling away from the sides yet. So I'm not even going to test it to see if it's done yet. I'm just going to let it keep going. I'll probably rotate it in about like 10 minutes. So by touching it, you're trying to see if it springs back. And my finger is still leaving a fingerprint, so it's not done yet. When you're checking to see if your cake is done, you're looking at it's pulling away from the sides of the pan, which it's starting to do that now. You're also looking to see if it springs back when you touch it, which it pretty much is now. Alright, and then to be super sure, you're going to put a toothpick in and see if it comes out clean. Now I'm going to test it one more time because it looks clean, but you know. And it's clean. So our cake is done. Gonna take it out and let it cool down. So we don't want to unmold the cake fresh out of the oven because we run the risk of it kind of breaking apart because it's so hot. So you want to give it about 15 minutes before, well, you want to give it a minimum of 5 minutes before you try to flip it out. I like to wait about 15 because I like to make sure it's not too hot where I can't touch it. So I'm going to flip it upside down onto this cake round, and then I'm going to take off the parchment and put it back on the cooling rack. So I put the round on the cake, flip it upside down. Now I'm going to take off the top. Good peel off the parchment. Okay, so I just unmolded the cake. And if you're not going to ice it, this cake is great with just a little bit of powdered sugar. It's so moist, it's really good on its own. It doesn't really need any filling or icing or anything. But this is going to be a birthday cake for Noel. And I want to show you guys how just the very basics of cake decorating and icing. So the first rule of cake decorating and icing is never cut into a hot cake. So I'm gonna let this cool overnight, and then tomorrow I'm going to start building my cake. So the reason why we don't want to cut into a hot cake, number one, it's gonna crumble. It's not set enough, and we don't want to have crumbs everywhere that are going to get mixed up in our icing, and we don't want the layers to fall apart. So it's better off that we wait until it's cooled down all the way. And it's going to take overnight to do that because the center of this cake is super hot, so it's going to take a day to cool down, right? You could put this in the refrigerator to speed up the process, or the freezer, but I don't have the room for that, so I always do it the day before, and then I know by the next day it's cool enough to work with. Another reason why you don't want to try to ice a hot cake is because you're going to melt the icing. So when I'm building my cakes, I usually plan it out in a 3-day process. My first day, I make all my fillings and my icings, and I make the cake. The second day, I build the cake. And if it's a very complicated cake or fondant cake, I have a third day to do all intricate decorations and stuff like that. This cake, it's not gonna be super complex, so it's just gonna be the 2 days really of baking the cake and doing the icings and fillings and whatnot, and then building and decorating the next day. So I'll show you guys how to do that in the next video. So thanks for stopping by Grace's place, and I hope you subscribe. Don't forget to give this video a like to wish Noel a happy birthday. If you absolutely can't wait to have chocolate cake, you can cut off the cake top and eat the top part, but I'm gonna go over how to cut cakes into straight layers in the next video. So you might want to hold off until the next video comes out.